Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming back for part two. I am really excited to be talking to you today about the next part of our training. Just a reminder, I'm Ruth Darlene, founder and executive director of Women of Silicon Valley, WomenSV. It's a nonprofit that is focused on education around covert abuse and coercive control. I also serve on the domestic violence death review team, and I'm really honored to be a voice for survivors at that committee so that we continue to shine a light on the more subtle forms of abuse that nonetheless pose lethality risks. And that's why we need to be so attuned in every profession to the nuances that accompany the subtle forms of abuse, like covert abuse and coercive control. Last week, we just a quick review. We covered some troubling statistics, like 1 in 3 women will be beaten or raped on the planet during her lifetime. We covered some definitions: overt abuse, covert abuse, covert coercive control, the culture of affluence, the profile of a sophisticated abuser, one face in public, another behind closed doors, the profile of a sophisticated survivor, one face in public, often very competent and successful. If she's a stay-at-home mom, it's all about chatting with the other moms at the playground, and who would ever guess she also has a different persona behind closed doors, living like a prisoner. So, and we covered types of abuse: financial, emotional, legal, technological. So today, if all goes well, the good Lord willing, we're going to be talking about the impact of domestic violence on children and adults. And I'll have some warnings today for therapists. I have given many trainings to therapists over the years, and I'm proud to say that I have a wonderful therapist on my board of directors who's been with me for 13 years, the 13 years of my program. And he acknowledges that what he learned about covert abuse and coercive control and the hazards of couples counseling and individual therapy with a covert abuser, he learned from WomenSV. So I am honored to hear that he has benefited from learning about this, and I hope I can provide the same service for you all today. So taking a look at that outline, the roadmap for today, let's kick it into gear and let's see if we can get there all together today. I do want to start by acknowledging that, you hear me talk a lot about male perpetrators, and that's because 90% of domestic violence victims are female. But I do want to acknowledge that men can be victims of abuse and women can be perpetrators. About 90% of adult victims of intimate partner violence are female. But it's more common to find female perpetrators of abuse in parents, but it's still more prevalent amongst men. And when women become abusive towards their children, it's often done as an explosive, unthinking act where the limbic brain takes over, and where you find male perpetrators of abuse towards children. It tends to be, especially when we're dealing with covert abusers and coercive controllers, it tends to be more calculating in an ongoing pattern of abusive power to control not just his partner, but his children as well. And wherever you find domestic violence, in intimate partner relationships perpetrated by a man against a woman, it increases the risk of physical and sexual abuse towards the children. So it's a red flag when you come across a client who is talking about her abusive husband. If they have children, please do some digging to see how safe the children are feeling. Because even if the police have been called to the scene, often children end up being sidelined, and the focus is on interviewing the adults in the room. But children are witnesses and often victims as well. You may remember some of these the scenes that are up here in the slide. Have you seen Mummy Dearest or read the book? Joan Crawford, that famous Hollywood actress who had a different persona behind closed doors that unfortunately her daughter saw all too much of. So A studies, it was a study put on by Kaiser, and it started off as a morbid obesity study. Why in this weight loss program were people losing the weight only to gain it back and more afterwards? And they found, as they started digging back further and further into their history, that it was often accompanied by experiences of violence and feeling unsafe in the childhood home. And they looked at different categories of abuse, and with more categories of abuse, they saw more self-harming, self-destructive behaviors, and more mental health and physical health issues throughout life. And with enough categories of abuse, I think 6 or more, it can take up to 20 years off your lifespan. So that's the thing to be aware of with the impact of domestic violence on children, which is ongoing into adulthood. These are the different categories they looked at: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, and the behaviors that this type of abuse led to. Behaviors and health conditions. And these are the questions that you're familiar with on your intake form. And I freely acknowledge I scored 8 out of 10 on the A study. And look at me, I'm still here. So I think with therapeutic intervention, I was blessed to have a lot of therapeutic intervention by trauma-informed therapists. And it really helped me make sense of what happened to me and to heal from it over time. So I am extra honored to be able to speak with you all today, because I have such tremendous respect for your healing profession. It worked for me. So let's look at the impact on children of witnessing and being surrounded by this feeling of being unsafe and at home, where a child is exposed to or a direct recipient of, and the child really is a direct recipient of intimate partner violence if they are exposed to it, because just witnessing it can cause such damage. It makes a child feel unsafe, and we found the younger the child is, the more impact it has. If you get a chance to watch the Attorney General's video called First Impressions, you can see it on YouTube. You'll see just what kind of impact it has, even on children before they develop language. But this is what can happen to a child as a result of being impacted by domestic violence. Now, ADD and ADHD may end up as a result of the way a child's brain works. It may just work differently, but as you know, it's a behavioral diagnosis. So what needs to happen, I think, is digging beneath the surface to see what is causing this child problems in terms of concentration in class. Are they having a hard time paying attention and fitting in and completing assignments because their brain works differently and they need some kind of accommodation? Or do they need that accommodation because they are distracted by all the chaos and trauma that they're being exposed to at home? So many different behavioral and mental health issues that children can be suffering from throughout their childhood and on into adulthood, from poor self-esteem, fear, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, cutting, self-harm, intense separation anxiety, even symptoms of mental health issues and personality disorders. We'll look at that in more depth in a moment. But promiscuity as they get older, looking for love in all the wrong places because they're not finding it in a healthy way at home. Even suicidality. You may be familiar with that Aspire program, wonderful program at El Camino Hospital. They are, I'm blessed to say, supporters of WomenSV. But many young people end up in a program like that, being suicidal even at that young age. And we have to look at children that end up trying to take their own lives. Is it because they didn't get into Stanford, that Ivy League school? Is it because they're not number one when they've been taught that your life is worth nothing? If you're not number one, I almost said your wife is worth nothing. There's a Freudian slip. So that same attitude that abusive men have towards their partners, that unless you're perfect, there's going to be trouble. They often have that same attitude towards their children, and which can result in various forms of addictions as well. So if we're looking at children's behavior from regression and limited pro-social skills, are they getting into bullying behavior? Are they completely withdrawing? Is it hard for them to make friends? Are they having temper tantrums? Let's dig beneath the surface. Are we just seeing the tip of the iceberg here? Does the child have conduct disorder? Are they getting ready to become a psychopath when they grow up? Or are they acting out what they've seen at home, the way dad treats mom, or sometimes the way mom treats dad? Are there a cluster of things happening at home? So could it be, and within them, could it be that their brain works differently and they're having additional problems concentrating because of what they're witnessing? So you all know the principle of Occam's razor, the reasoning principle, that the simplest explanation tends to be the correct one. That is the case in many cases in life, but not here, not with covert abuse, not with coercive control. The simplest explanation when a woman shows up at the emergency room saying that her husband seems to know exactly where she is at all hours of the day, even when she leaves her cell phone at home, he knows what she's saying, saying and doing, and everywhere, in the home, in the car, at work, wherever she is. And isn't it easy to sort of jump to the conclusion that she's exhibiting symptoms of paranoia? Well, if we dig beneath the surface, why is she feeling paranoid? And if you look at any of the personality inventories or personality assessments, psychological testing that is being done on survivors today, it's not sensitive enough to get at, is she feeling paranoid because she's living with a covert abuser who is causing her to walk on eggshells and think that her every move is being watched, because in fact it is, through technological abuse. So that's what we have to be sensitive towards, that there's a surface appearance of somebody's behavior and the way they express themselves, but are they scattered, distracted? Do they break down in tears easily? Do they seem to be having mood swings? Are they having erratic behavior? Are they looking over their shoulders? Are they easily startled? Are there organic changes going on within their brain? Are they experiencing and exhibiting symptoms because of something that happened in their life that they're dealing with? Are they operating out of their things that have happened in their childhood? Or are they living as a prisoner in their own home, a victim of domestic terrorism by a partner that's making them feel afraid 24/7? It's so important to be attuned to that. And what happens if in a relationship that ends, if there's children involved, even if there's a restraining order against a parent, unfortunately, the courts are still fully focused on reuniting the family in all cases. Regardless of the history of domestic violence, their ideal is for the family members to be getting along, connecting, healing, reuniting, which is wonderful. Even if there's been a history of domestic violence, if the perpetrator of that domestic violence is willing to do self-reflection, has some feelings of remorse, is willing to change and put the needs of the family above his own selfish needs and desire to maintain the status quo where he controls everything in his environment. We're not talking about that type of individual that is willing to have some insight and do self-reflection and hold himself accountable for harm done. We're talking about the covert abuser and coercive controller who is adept at looking like the devoted father concerned about the mental health of his wife, and hurt that his wife is trying to prevent him from reuniting with his beloved children that he did so much for in the past while his wife sat in bed watching Netflix. That may or may not be true. If you dig deeper, you might find out that she did all the child care while he was out cavorting and carousing. But if she doesn't have receipts and witnesses to show for what she did in terms of surrendering her life to dedicate it to her family and try to keep the ship together, yeah, it'll easily turn into a he said, she said, high conflict divorce, and she will be judged very harshly for being a restrictive parent, guilty of gatekeeping and parental alienation, which is a term still flying around. But what's more likely is her husband is trying to sever the connection between children and mom and turn the children against her. I see it over and over again, this dynamic. So Emma Katz, PhD in psychology over in the United Kingdom. I've had some wonderful conversations with her. I'm working on a book, and she is kindly agreed to write a little foreword to my book. I have high regard for Emma Katz. If you get to subscribe to her blog using Substacks and look at her book that she wrote about coercively controlling fathers. Her focus is on men who are abusive, because again, look at Evan Stark's book, also PhD, Dr. Evan Stark's book entitled Coercive Control, How Men Entrap Women in Personal Life, which goes on, if he's abusive towards his wife, as we've talked about, he's much more likely to be abusive towards the children as well, post-separation even. And that was the study that Dr. Katz did. When coercive control continues to harm children post-separation, fathering, stalking, and domestic violence. And I won't go into detail about this study, but I hope that you get a chance to look at it in more detail. Here are the highlights, the headlines from that study. Fathers can use the same tactics of coercive control against their children that they use against their ex-partners. Children can be direct victims of coercive control, and they can experience it in much the same way as adults do, feeling confused and afraid, living constrained lives, and being entrapped and harmed by the perpetrator. Children can show symptoms of PTSD just as easily as adults can. Coercive control can harm children and young people emotionally, psychologically, physically, socially, educationally, in every area of their lives, not to mention spiritually. There are women who are not allowed, in quotes, to take their children to church or to their faith-based organization because their husbands have forbidden them to do that. So, robust measures are required to deal with coercive control perpetrating fathers in order to prevent them from using father-child relationships to continue imposing coercive control on children and ex-partners. And we wonder where perpetrators come from. It's a learned behavior. Let's be careful about listening to Dr. Richard Gardner, the psychiatrist who committed suicide, but kind of minimize the impact of pedophilia and talked about a parental alienation syndrome, which has since been debunked. But when he started talking about it years ago, he talked about it as a mechanism by which mothers attempted to alienate children from their fathers. So now the ongoing problem now, and this is a study by Joan Meyer, JD, with George Washington University in this 5-year outcome study. The problem is now in court, a woman who alleges a history of domestic violence and sexual abuse by father against child, along with father's claim of parental alienation. We get that trifecta happening there. It increases the likelihood significantly of her losing custody of her children. And so what we see now, even today in the 21st century in court with in courts that are not trauma informed, is the finding that, or the principle that father's claim of alienation supersedes mother's claim of abuse. So we wonder why women are reluctant to come forward about their history, and why that also ends up discrediting them. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you leave? So here are the study recommendations. Why the pictures of the fairy tales here? I think it's never too early to start talking to children about the dual nature that some people have, the mask that some people wear out in the world. And Emma Katz's recommendations from that study are to give children detailed age-appropriate information about coercive control. And we don't, now, of course, the court will really heavily admonish parents not to speak ill of the other parent, but we're not ever suggesting that a woman say, "Oh, your dad's a jerk," or be bad mouthing no parent should badmouth the other, but neither should they deny the truth. If we talk about physical actions, yes, when dad picks up a glass of water and throws it at mom in front of me, that's scary. That makes me feel scared and afraid, and I want to run and hide. Uh, if these things aren't being acknowledged, and worse, being denied, oh, that never happened. Dad would never do that. Your dad would never do that. Did I tell you this story about the child that fell off their bike and lost a tooth? Did I tell you that story last week? Does it bear repeating? Did I tell you? Yeah, that dad coached the child to say that he lost the tooth because he was learning to ride his bike and he just fell. Not to say that dad shoved him so hard he fell off the bike. Over time, if the child is hearing reality being rewritten like that, the child is going to start gaslighting himself or herself and think, okay, yeah, that's really what happened. It was my fault. And the child gets into self-blame and thinks, oh, they're stupid. The reason why they couldn't ride that bike or learn it so quickly is because there's something wrong with them. In another case, a dad, a coercively controlling father, was giving some math coaching to his son, and son wasn't picking up quickly enough. And dad was saying, how can you be so GD stupid? I can't believe I have a son that's as stupid as you are. You are so completely useless. Can you imagine what that does to a child's self-esteem? And then you see the child later in the day banging his head against the wall saying, stupid, stupid, stupid. Now that child is looking like, oh, this child is engaging in self-harm. What's going on there? Let's address this child. What's wrong with this child? And you'll see later there's another question, and probably you are already asking that question, not what's wrong with this child. So it's never too young to start talking to children about coercive control and what it looks like. You can look at resources that are focused on children and young people. And why don't we take a look at some fairy tales and see what they have to offer and to teach? Mind you, some of them don't teach helpful things when it comes to learning about love and romance. For example, Snow White. For example, Sleeping Beauty. Fairy tales do have a lot to answer for when they are trying to transmit that message to young women that all you have to do is wait for Prince Charming to come along and sweep you off your feet. You meet him today at the ball, fancy dress ball, you get married tomorrow, and you fly off to the castle the next day. Boom, 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 and you're done. Oh, it's not like that. That's not when the fairy tale ends. That's when the story begins. If she fell in love with Beauty and woke up next to the Beast. So if we can start with fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood and that wolf in sheep's clothing as she's, tripping along to grandma's house with her basket of cookies. Isn't that how we often enter the world as young adults, young women, looking for love? And on my social media on womensv.org, you'll see some of my conversations with a young woman in her 20s, this wonderful media influencer, Eleni, where I asked her, Eleni, as a young woman, we are representing two sides of the age spectrum here. Is it kind of old hat now to be talking about young women waiting for Prince Charming or thinking that they've met Prince Charming when they're going out with somebody and feeling their little hormones fluttering and they're falling in love and getting swept off their feet? And she said that's still happening today, this dream that Prince Charming is going to come along. So we have to really cut through that myth, that way of looking at love, that it's all about hormones, and that is he nice, is he charming, is he funny, is he upwardly mobile, financially self-sufficient? Let's dig beneath the surface. He could be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, all these fine things he could give to worthy causes. And as we found out last week, he could have a very different dark side behind closed doors. Yeah, the better to control you with, my dear. And how about Hansel and Gretel with, here they are, oh, these poor little kids, well, they've been ejected by the wicked stepmother. I think women get a bad rap in a lot of fairy tales. In this particular one, stepmother has, gotten rid of the kids, the annoying little kids. And here they are wandering around in the wilderness, and they come across this little cookie cafe, this cottage that's made out of cookies. But what are the cookies made out of? That's when we have to dig beneath the surface and have a conversation with children to say, oh, look how kindly she looks. You know, there's even the teacher in Harry Potter, this sweet little smiling lady with her cats and the teacups and the saucers, and let's have tea together while I torture you. So people can have these, women can have these two faces, men can have these two faces. And here's an exercise in pedophilia. Sorry to ruin your experience of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, but look what he did to this village. All the children were lured away by this young Michael Jackson type, you know, playing his music, and off they went to Neverland, never, never to be seen again. So you can talk about what surface appearance looks like in with these cautionary tales, and you can frame it in a way that children can understand, so that they start to look beneath the surface. Be prepared for questions that will come up, because after one of these conversations, a little girl said to her mom, "Mommy, is Dad a bad guy?" So let's hold that question and see how we all might answer it going forward. So now, hazards of therapeutic intervention with a covert abuser. Why do people come to therapists? And now, as a layperson, when I ask my survivors, why did you go for so many of my survivors, almost all of them have sought out therapists for one reason or another. And I'll tell you where it worked well and where it didn't, based on the 1,400 women that I've worked with over the years. But here are reasons that the women that I work with report going to seek help, counseling from therapists: anxiety, depression, worried about their kids, or themselves sometimes experiencing ADD or ADHD. Parenting issues, having a hard time controlling their kids, and many of them still in an abusive relationship, many of them going through the divorce dissolution process, and many of them still suffering afterwards with parenting issues, having children that are out of control, that are defiant, that have hit them. And that's when we talk about pressing the reset button, where you might want to think about interventions anywhere from individual counseling with a trauma-informed child therapist. Even if they're young kids, they can do play therapy, and you'll often see truth enacted in the way they act out the dynamics at home. But all the way to things like wilderness camps with behavioral therapists, that they take everything away and then they earn it back little by little as they start to behave more and more like regular people and learn to get socialized. They can start off in a wilderness camp, and then they can end up going to a reputable, and do the research to talk to an educational consultant who's been around the country and thoroughly vetted therapeutic boarding schools and residential treatment centers, because there are a lot of them, especially in states that are don't have as much monitoring as California does, but there are states that are in it to make money. And children have died in programs where there's a lack of supervision, and there are kids that are way out of control. If there's aggression, physical violence, and a lack of training on the part of the staff, that puts kids at added risk. But you want to be exploring all these options. Parenting coaches can help too, to help set boundaries and limits. And it's not enough to go to a parenting program like the Parent Project, which has wonderful information in it, of like things like T-Spot, take everything away for a short period of time. T-Spot, that works great if you're doing couples counseling with two individuals that are just having a hard time communicating with one another. They still love each other and pretty much respect each other, and they kind of take turns pissing each other off, but they're basically good people and they're trying to do better and be better. If you're doing couples counseling with them, they might want to end up going to the Parent Project, and learn how to be on the same page with their kids as far as discipline goes. And that could be an excellent program for them. But what happens when parents aren't on the same page? Then you get one parent saying A and the other one saying B. One parent saying, "Oh, well, Billy, you got to do your homework before you can play video games." And then you got dad coming along saying, "Hey, Billy, let's go play, Halo." What do you do in that kind of, or you get mom hugging child because a child has fallen and is crying, and dad taking mother, grabbing her by the arm saying, "What are you doing? You're going to turn this kid into a sissy." So you get this kind of crazy making behavior that happens when two parents have opposite sets of values and disciplinary interventions. And what's going to happen to a child? Tilt A equals not A. That's how you drive a child or an adult crazy. So that's when you might want to be thinking about even a more drastic form of intervention like the ones I talked about, but just make sure to thoroughly vet whatever program you're considering. So why do people see therapists for any of these potential problems, right? But what is the basic assumption that we start with? You as therapists, me as an advocate, physicians, faith leaders, attorneys get paid to believe their clients, right? I don't get paid to believe my survivors. We operate on a donation basis, and we don't charge our survivors anything for the services that we provide for them. But they come to me, they tell their story, and I believe them. When you go to a doctor, isn't the doctor assuming that, doctor, it hurts when I go like this? And he's going to tell you, well, don't go like this. But he's going to assume that you're telling the truth. Why would you lie to a doctor unless you got what, Munchausen's, but why would your client lie to you? Don't you start with that assumption they're being honest with you? And that's when all the other tools of your profession come into play. Oh, this husband is coming to me complaining that his wife doesn't want to be intimate with him anymore, that she's cold, or that she's hostile. I have a survivor who is no longer a survivor. I may have mentioned to you that that's why my work is dedicated to her, that she literally died of a broken heart as a result of living with a husband for 30 years that never raised his voice to her and never showed any form of violence, cruelty, or name calling or yelling in front of the children, and yet still managed to turn all three of them against her over the period of those 30 years because of what he did in the bedroom behind closed doors when no one else was looking and in a monotone. Just look at John Gottman's book, When Men Batter Women. He was the cobra, not the pit bull. And she died. So, well, all the rest of the world thought he was this charming, great guy. And they can fake normal. They can fake nice. They do that in the beginning when they meet someone like this. That's the honeymoon period we talked about last week. But what happens over time when he starts to reveal that other side to her, but still keeps the mask on with you? I have talked to forensic psychologists, many of them, because I belong to the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. And there are forensic therapists in that organization, along with district attorneys, FBI, CIA, law enforcement, social workers. I was the only domestic violence advocate that ever attended any of the conferences, I'm sorry to say. But whenever a forensic psychologist would lecture, I would go up after and ask that forensic psychologist, are you able to tell when somebody's a psychopath? And it was even Reed Malloy, the spot and quote here from Reed Malloy, who has expertise in psychopathy. Please look him up. Look at that unusual spelling of his name. But he has expertise in psychopathy. And it's not psychopathology, but psychopathy. But he said to me, even a seasoned professional can be fooled by a seasoned liar. And these other quotes get at the same point. They can look you in the eye. They can have crocodile tears in their eyes and tell you how they are suffering at the hands of their abusive wives, and you'll believe them. I'll believe them. I've had a dozen men in my program over the last 13 years, but my focus, my area of expertise is on women. And we have statistics on our side to believe them because 90% of domestic violence survivors are female. So please don't be swayed by this charismatic, charming, seemingly authentic person comes through your door and he's got letters after his name, or he is in some kind of esteemed profession and he is talking to you about how he's suffering at the hands of his wife. So please dig deeper, see what is going on in that relationship. It's we are taught, I think, across the board to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think it was John F. Kennedy who said, "Forgive your enemies, but remember their names." So when we're starting a relationship, let's have people earn our trust. Um, and I have been fooled by some women over the years as well. And some of them have come after me later and attacked me and mounted a smear campaign against me. I'm still here because people, wonderful men and women in positions of power, they know my work, they know me, and they stand behind me and around me. So that's another important a component of doing this work. Don't try it alone, because if you unmask a covert abuser, watch out, because I know therapists who've been subpoenaed by abusive parents and had their reputations attacked. So it takes strength to stand up go against the flow. You know what happened to Freud, right? When he first came up with this theory that that women are hysterical because they're impacted by the incest that's been going on in the home, and he got such blowback from that. Well, he came up with a different theory. You know, it's hard to stand up against the peer pressure that happens in the community. So make sure you all have a strong village that you've built around you if you're working in this area. So because otherwise, working with someone like this, how is it possible to affect any kind of significant change in a person like this if they have a personality disorder? That's the least favorite condition, isn't it, for therapists to work with if they're in the DSM and the cluster B? If they have, what if they have a hidden agenda? How is change going to be possible? What if they're going to punish their partner if you're seeing them in couples counseling for speaking the truth? What if they are fully invested in the status quo when it comes to their behavior and they have no desire to change? They want their partner to change, and they'll be telling you all kinds of reasons why it's their problem, not his, but his wife's. What if they don't present a true picture of who they are? What if they're very good at playing the victim? And especially if he's the one dropping the kids off at school, picking them up. Where's mom? Well, he's forbidden her to do that. He won't let her do that. He's stolen the car keys from her during the times when the kids have got to get to school. She has less and less pleasant. She has less and less presence on the playground. Because he's there looking like the good guy, and every now and again he'll plant a seed saying, "Oh gosh, I've had, getting a little trouble with my wife. I love her so much, but I'm concerned about her mental health, and now I see that she's on this prescription medication, and I thought you're only supposed to take one of those pills a day, and I see, oh look, I come home and the whole bottle's gone." He's planting these seeds little by little each time he's talking to one of the teachers or confiding in another parent, and then he starts having play dates. They're going through the divorce now, and suddenly he's the play date champion of the world. He's the one taking them on field trips, and he's the funny one telling the kids stories. What's not to like about this guy? He's a doctor, lawyer, engineer. He's well respected in the community, and she's been a stay-at-home mom. She gave up her doctor, lawyer, engineer career to raise the children and try to create the semblance of a family life. And she's gotten isolated because that's what you saw last week in the power and control wheel. It's one of the things they do. It's so calculated. And please don't say, oh, does he really mean to do that? Like that book, why does he do that? But look at the subtitle, Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men by Lundy Bancroft, which is a very good book. But let's be careful about getting stuck in why, because it keeps you rooted in the past and maybe thinking, maybe there's, if I get at why, oh, he's got a drinking problem, or he's depressed, or he has, trauma from his childhood. Well, let's take him to therapy and maybe he can fix all those problems. All of those may be true, and he may be an abuser with a character that is all about power in order to control, the abuse of power in order to control an intimate partner. If you're dealing with someone like that, how are you going to affect any kind of significant change? They're not willing to do self-reflection. They don't hold themselves responsible for any harm done. It's about making the other person to blame always. They lie easily and often, even when they don't need to. They're pulling the wool over your eyes. The better to gaslight you with. They lack, here are key factors here. They lack empathy, and you all, I'm not allowed to, but you all are to make that diagnosis. that they lack empathy, remorse, self-reflection, moral compass. Who are we dealing with someone like that? That's when you want to look at a book called Splitting. If you're dealing with somebody that's a client that you are wanting to support when they're going through the divorce process, or check out their website, the High Conflict Institute. It's really a misnomer to call it high conflict. It's high attack. He's attacking, she's defending herself. She's not in court multiple times because she wants to be there. He's dragging her back. And yet she gets told by the judge, why can't you two get along for the sake of your children? Well, watch out for that, because the abuse has shifted now from home into the legal arena. And now he gets to abuse her by proxy using the court system. But when you're dealing with someone like that and thinking about reunification therapy, we're going to talk about that in a moment. Watch out for the father that just wants to control his wife still, to control the children and punish his wife by turning the children against her. And he may have been completely neglectful before and even abusive towards the children, but suddenly he can't bear to be without them. And what happens there? He gets to look good in the eyes of the judge. If he can scoop custody of the children by setting her up, making her look like she's the problem, or even settling for 50-50 custody, because that's what the court wants in the end, 50-50 custody, then he can reduce his child support payments. But the best of all, he gets to hurt her in the way it will hurt the most, by going after the children. Let's look at the hazards of intervention with a covert abuser who's resistant to change. Then you get the situation where a therapist, family therapist, is trying to do therapy with the family, and dad, who had no connection with religion before, was an atheist, and it was one of the reasons why mom got a divorce. She was a Christian. Daughter was a Christian. Now she's 16 years old and doesn't want to spend time at dad's house. Why? Because he's been sexually inappropriate with her in the past, but now he's threatening to cut off her tuition if he doesn't spend overnights with her. And so they're doing reconnection therapy. And in the first session, she's in the room, 16-year-old daughter, father, and therapist. And the first thing dad says is, honey, I know we've had some difficulties in the past, but I've been praying about it. And I think with the good Lord watching over us, we can create a miracle here with our therapist's help. And then she can't help it. She bursts out and says, Dad, you're such a fake. And then the therapist jumps in and says, what are you saying that for? Why your dad clearly is trying to meet you at least halfway. So you've got to make more of an effort here. And she learns very quickly to be silent. So how can you reunite a family in this situation where dad is being such a key influence on the child? They tend to gravitate towards the more powerful parent. It's not safe to acknowledge. It won't be safe to say to dad or acknowledge publicly how much the child loves mom. And she may, because she's the safe parent, she may see more disruptive behavior acting out because she's the safe one. And dad may turn that against her and say, the kids are perfectly well behaved with me, and look how out of control they are with mom. So, and the children are learning at the master's knee how to behave when they grow up. Now, a child may think, is dad a bad guy? So the child could think, well, if I'm half dad's DNA and half mom's DNA, because they tend to be black and white thinkers, does that mean I'm half bad guy? Well, that's one possibility, but here's another. 1/3 dad's DNA, 1/3 mom's DNA, and 1/3 whatever you choose to make of your experiences, because you can grow up with much more empathy and compassion, kindness, and understanding. You can become a therapist yourself, a judge, a police officer that's all about justice and safety and protection because of what you experienced. So hazards of individual therapy with a covert abuser, you risk reinforcing his worldview. But if he's got a hidden agenda, one of our going to couples counseling with one of our survivors, she said, I told her husband I want a divorce, and she told him, and he told her, what are you going to throw 20 years of marriage down the drain? Let's try couples counseling first. Give us 6 months. And who's a reasonable person not going to try that? So they go to couples counseling, and all during that 6 months, he's looking like he's trying to make an effort to change. And all the while, he's using that time to hide the joint assets. And when she files divorce, she finds there's very little left in the joint accounts. So watch out for anything that's said in the family counseling session that could be used against her. And these are actual comments made by therapists that were reported to me by our survivors, that the survivors need to work on establishing intimacy. They recommended to buy lingerie and to try to make more of an effort in the bedroom. They may not know what he's done to her in the bedroom in the past, even while she was pregnant, even while she was nursing a child. I won't go into detail, but you can imagine. And this is therapist Nancy Marshall, who said that you have to look very carefully at symptoms of mental health problems, because look at the bottom one, they mirror those of the trauma that a survivor experiences in an abusive relationship. So these are examples we can talk about later. But here's the cartoon here. Family therapy isn't for everyone. The therapist is saying here, so you abandoned him, you murdered his aunt, and this is Star Wars, and uncle, you murdered his aunt and uncle, you blew up his sister's planet, you chopped off his hand, and now you want him to see you as a father figure and join you on the dark side. How do you think Luke feels about that? So, good for you. She's got his number. So these are the assumptions we talked about earlier: honesty, self-reflection. And if you determine that he's a covert abuser, then what do you want to switch to? Protecting the survivor and helping to lift up her self-esteem and confidence, develop self-regulation so that she doesn't say or do something that she'll regret later if he's trying to set her up. She's got to get calm and centered and focused, and that's where your work can be critical here, so she can start planning her next steps, because she'll be in a state of trauma, and it's very hard for her to do that. So if you can start by looking at this list of red flags and see if you start to identify any of them. Then starting the conversation. There are some conversation starters. If she may have a hard time recognizing it as abuse, but you may be in a much more objective position to recognize it than she is. And you can help her start to, especially if she's been married for a long time, and questions that you can ask about controlling the finances and her fear. It's one of the questions on the danger assessment that is administered, or the lethality assessment on every police call for a domestic violence incident. Do you think that, are you worried that he might kill you? And if she says yes, she's really piercing the denial that so many women have, and you want to pay attention to that. More question, or what's the worst thing you think he could do? And she may not want to bring herself to actually say that, but she may be afraid of him, and you can explore why. More questions to ask, what to look for, what else to look for. So you all consider this a little sort of, I don't know, a handbook that you can refer to later. And some comments about the danger assessment. Are you familiar with it? The danger assessment by Jackie Campbell, doctorate in nursing from Johns Hopkins University. These are 10 of the 20 questions that are on it. But this would be a helpful tool for you to do some further investigation of. You can go online, and I've included the website there where you can do the training. You can do it in a couple of hours, and it'll really inform your practice, because once you start asking these questions, and you can tweak them, has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a lethal weapon? That would include driving dangerously in the car. So you can explore these questions. Has the violence or the emotional abuse, the control, has that increased in frequency over the past year? This one, 13, is really getting at the coercive control. It's the one, like, a question that is zeroing in on it. Does he control most or all of your daily activities? Does he tell you who you can be friends with, when you can see your family, how much money you can use, or when you can take the car? So remember, with the physician we talked about last week, who ended up being killed by her partner, how controlling her mother reported him to be. Coercive control, as we know, is a lethality risk. And in this one, do you believe he is capable of killing you? These are really important questions. All 20 of them are important. And the police pull out 12 of these questions, but they always are supposed to ask these questions about using a weapon against her. That could be a knife. That could be stuffing a sock down her throat. That could be turning the staircase into a lethal weapon. accidentally jostling her while the dog is on the stairs. And oh, well, accidents happen. So even here, this danger assessment is designed to get at more obvious forms of abuse. And you want to dig beneath the surface and use your own ability to look at or think about nuance and innuendo when you're dealing with a covert abuse situation. We can go back and talk about this more later, but I want to just hit the highlights here. These 3 questions we talked about. Has he ever used a weapon against you? Has he ever threatened to kill you or someone else? Do you think or do you think he might try to kill you? And I have women who say many women who are afraid that their partner may end up killing them. But you can kill somebody by putting eye drops in their morning coffee, or by withholding medication they need to stay alive, or by driving recklessly. There are many ways to stage an accident as well. So we talked about some of these household items that can be turned into weapons. Even eye drops. And I think we mentioned the story of my beloved advocate who lost her child. But when I go, I'm taking Alex. You can see that clip on the if you type in Megan Kelly, MEGYN, and Ruth Patrick, which is how I what I went by before my divorce. You can watch that clip on YouTube. Now, this is what police read in their domestic violence protocol that I was pleased and honored to be part of editing. Perhaps the single most important factor appears to be whether or not the victim answers yes to the question, do you think your current or previous partner might try to kill you? From the thousands of women that Jackie Campbell studied who'd ended up getting killed by their partner and who had been in the system somewhat before, actually only 4% of them had ever reached out for help from a domestic violence agency. So please encourage survivors to reach out and get help from, there's many wonderful domestic violence agencies in Santa Clara County. So I encourage them to reach out. But also they found that a significant percentage tended to minimize the level of danger they were in. That's why that danger assessment, if you give it to your clients, can help them really get an objective measure that can start, because asthma can kill you. And especially if you withhold medication from somebody having an asthma attack and then drive 5 miles an hour on the way to the hospital looking like the devoted husband. If they die on the way, what is that? Death by natural causes or murder. This is the scoring card for the danger assessment. And here's the little, the cue card here to help you do the weighted scoring. It's a 1 point for all the questions except the last one, and then added in danger according to what the abuse has been, like putting your hands on her throat. The other diagnostic tool that can be very helpful for you to look at is the women's experience of battering. And I talked to Dr. Evan Stark about this, and I asked him, what do you think of this tool? And he said he likes it very much, and he thinks it's very helpful to get at the more subtle forms of abuse. With the danger assessment we just talked about, they work from the outside in. Things that you can see in the environment. He's driving dangerously. He threatened to kill me. Those are more obvious forms of abuse, sending you threatening messages. But here we start from the inside and work out about how she's feeling. I felt ashamed. I felt frightened. I felt trapped. I felt like I couldn't rock the boat because I was afraid of what he might do. And that's when you start probing. They first start by saying, well, how would you measure that, how you felt on a scale of 1 to 6? Where 1 is you disagree and 6 is you strongly agree with a statement. Well, I really was afraid to rock the boat. I give that a 6. Okay, but why? And then probe a little bit more and say, well, was there any time when you did rock the boat, and what happened as a result? Well, we were coming home from a party one night, and he was upset that I was talking to a man for maybe a little bit too long. And I saw his foot going harder and harder on the accelerator. When I asked him to back off, he started going 90 miles an hour instead of 75. And then when I got very upset and asked him to stop, please stop, he stopped on the highway. So she learned, one trial learning, to be very careful what she said about when they're in the car. This is a whole training that I did at last year's domestic violence conference, and that a family law attorney who's on my board, Rachel McKenzie, gave on my behalf at the Santa Clara County's domestic violence conference. It's a workshop that I put together to help providers walk survivors through the process of telling their story in covert abuse, coercive control, as well as physical and sexual violence, but distilling it into a 2-page summary that can be adapted according to whoever they're seeking support from, whether it be first making sense of it themselves or reaching out to a therapist or a law enforcement or attorney. It's not legal advice, but it's a way to shape their story and put it into a condensed form, because especially if they're going through divorce, they have to tell their story over and over again. So Rachel did a great job presenting it. She's also chair of the Santa Clara County Bar Association. So, and she's been successful getting restraining orders on the basis of coercive control. So she's an expert in the field. And here's what you can do to protect the health and safety of your clients. You can screen for coercive control. You can interview couples separately. First, always start out separately to rule out any kind of indication that a woman is living in fear or feeling controlled. And sometimes a man start to learn to recognize red flags, go back through the other sides, and that'll help you identify some of them. When she's telling her story, just listen to her and interrupt only to clarify. Make sure you can validate. Don't let her feel like you're being judgmental. Oh, yet you're married 30 years to this man. He did all these things, and yet you stayed. One of my survivors was told that by her therapist. So if they feel judgment or shame from you, you'll never see them again. Don't pressure them to leave, end the relationship, or get a restraining order before they're ready, or even they may never be ready, but you can still be with them and support them for as long as it takes for them to make the next right move. Yeah, but if you can encourage them and affirm their right to live, it's their fundamental human right to live in peace and safety in their own homes. And let them know they don't have to deal with this issue alone anymore. If you can lift them up, support them, and especially with your faith-based practice, this is a time when they need to draw on God the most. So they're not just mere mortals handling this problem, but they can draw on this infinite source of love and protection that can help them keep centered and focused going forward, that there will be meaning that they can find in this experience for them. Down the road, they'll be able to make sense of it. And it's not, God, why did you do this to me? But God, please guide me through it as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because I know you're with me, and I know that there is evil in the world, but God, I know you are good. Jesus, I trust in you. Holy Spirit, come. These are sort of words that they can tell, prayers that they can offer to themselves to make it through the day and help inform your practice and their practice as they take what they're learning from you and take it home so they can be safer, whether they're with their partner or whether they've left. Remember, if they've left, over 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after a woman, after the relationship ends. So safety planning is such a key part of this, and they can look at my website. There's the link to that. And if they're younger, there's a teen version on Love is Respect, which is a wonderful website for young people. Here's the note to end on here that the good news. Once you watched First Impressions, the Attorney General's video that you can see on YouTube and see all the damage that's done to children, how it lasts throughout adulthood, without intervention. But with intervention, because of the neuroplasticity of the brain, we know that there is recovery and healing, and especially with your trauma-informed help as therapists, is always possible. It is always possible. But please make sure you take care of yourselves throughout this process. You're giving, and you don't want to, be trying to draw on that empty cup. Fill it up with your own prayer practice and mindfulness and looking after yourself. These are examples of self-care. Please take a look at them and see what could be helpful for you. Every day, start from that full cup with prayer, with offering your work up to God, and these acts of service that your survivors are so blessed to have from you. So I'm really honored and grateful for the partnership that we have. Please let me know if you ever want me to come back and do a workshop on doing the executive summary workshop. Be happy to do that in a part 3 down the road. But in the meantime, I'm just super happy to continue to partner with you in this work. You can tell I'm a woman of faith, and I am blessed to know all of you, and God bless you and your beautiful work. So please take good care of yourselves. There's a whole, if you have more questions, reach out to me at info@womensv.org. So thank you so much for your kind attention today.